Today, as I continue my journey through the British beer styles, we're heading north of the border for a Scottish ale that is incredibly light in alcohol, but not so much in taste. And after flirting with fermenters that can hold pressure, I'm finally going all the way for my first ever pressurized fermentation, and I'm doing it in this Firmzilla. Hello, I'm Martin Keane, taking the Homebrew Challenge to brew 99 beers in 99 weeks, and thank you for joining me for the next 10 minutes as we explore brewing, fermenting, and tasting a beer style that I've never actually tried before. Scottish Light really does live up to its name of light, 2.9% light in this case. So with a beer of this sort of gravity, you might expect it to be a bit lacking in the taste department, but that should not be the case. This should have quite a forward malt profile, sort of a caramelly taste. And let's talk about how we're going to do that with the ingredients. Now, original gravity for this beer is 1031. 1031 is a super low starting gravity. Even my American light lager was about 1040. Now, the base malt for this beer is Maris Otter, and I'm using 84% Maris Otter. Then, as for the specialty malts, well, they're all going to be a little bit dark and caramelly as is required by the style. So I have 8% of caramel 80, 6% of pale chocolate, and 2% of roasted barley. And if you want an easy way to assemble all of those ingredients, head on over to Atlantic Brew Supply, where you can buy a recipe kit for this very beer in all grain or extract form. I'm brewing a 2.5 gallon batch of Scottish ale, and the grain bill, hold on. Yeah, this is it. And so beginneth my mash, 152 Fahrenheit. Pressurized fermentation. So far, of the pressurized fermenters that are available, I've been using this. This is the Firmzilla All-Rounder. Now, I've not done a full pressurized fermentation in this, but I have used this for a closed transfer and also as a serving vessel. This guy is also a Firmzilla, and it has a few extra features. Now, like the All-Rounder, this is a PET fermenter, plastic fermenter, and it holds up to 35 psi of pressure. But the difference is, where the All-Rounder was really just the fermentation vessel itself, this actually has something extra. It has a dump valve on the bottom here, which you can pull down and actually dump yeast or hops or whatever it is that you want to dump out of this thing. So it's a little bit more advanced, and actually that's how I'm going to use it. Now, if I take this apart a little bit, at the top here we've got two posts, one for liquid and one for gas. And you'll see that the liquid post is connected to this float here, and just like with the All-Rounder, this floats on top of the liquid and pulls liquid from the top when you're trying to get stuff out of here. The other one is then for the gas post, which will be useful for actually maintaining a certain pressure. On the bottom here, we do have this dump valve here. So if we pull this, it would allow what's in the bottom of the fermenter to come down to here. And then this can be unscrewed. So if, for example, you're trying to harvest yeast, then you will have all of that in this container here. What does pressurized fermentation mean? It means that we're going to add yeast and ferment under pressure here. So we're going to actually put everything under a certain PSI. I'm going to use, I think, 15 PSI, and then everything will ferment under pressure here. What that means is, well, there's a few benefits or notable characteristics of a pressurized fermentation. One is that if you are brewing a particularly hoppy beer, then you'll get a little bit more hop utilization. So it's nice for hoppy style beers. That's not the case with Scottish Light. The other thing is that it reduces the amount of esters created by the yeast. Now, if you're looking for esters, if you're brewing a Hefeweizen, for example, this would not be a good choice. But if you're looking for something that's going to give you quite a clean character, then pressurized fermentation could be something interesting to try. Now, the way that we're going to maintain 15 psi of pressure is that we will put the pressure in here, just using a CO2 tank initially to get it to 15 psi. And once it's there, I'm going to use a spunning valve to regulate how much pressure is in this thing. So this is a spunning valve where I can set that I want no more than 15 psi of pressure. And if the pressure builds up more than that, which of course it will do as the beer ferments, then it will just be exited out from here. So we'll maintain 15 psi of pressure. What this should also mean is when the fermentation is done, the beer will be carbonated. So there's no extra stage to worry about carbonating the beer here. It's going to be carbonating while it's fermenting. This beer only has bittering hops. I'm using Fuggle hops. For my bittering, I'm going to throw these in at the start of the boil to yield about 19 IBU of bitterness. Now I need to sanitize this before I use it, so I'm just going to take the hose that is running water through my plate chiller. I put some Star San in here and add some water. I've also given it a little bit of pressure just to make sure that everything is sealed properly, and I've just put a little picnic tap on here so that I can run some Star San through the beer line that's inside this thing. Just before you add the wort, it is worth making sure that this valve is closed. We don't want anything going into this, through this dump valve to this collection jar at the bottom just yet. So this is closed. It's ready now to receive the beer. Yeast for this beer is Wyeast 1728 Scottish Ale. What else? Let's add that in. Now, the beer is in the fermentation vessel and I've added in some pressure. It actually isn't required to add in pressure because obviously the fermentation will build pressure in this guy anyway, but I did set this to 15 psi just using the regulator in my keezer here. And the reason I do that is because it makes setting the spunning valve a little bit easier. So I have this set now to 15 psi, that's what the spunning valve is reporting. And I've just twiddled with this little knob here just enough so that I can start to hear a little bit of gas coming out, so I know that I'm at about 15 psi, and once I get above that it will start relieving pressure. Now this is too big to fit in one of my fermentation chambers, but the ambient temperature in the basement this time of year is about 68 Fahrenheit, so I'm just going to let it ride at ambient temperature and watch the show. Right then, let's try this. Welcome, Lauren, to Scottish Light. Now, this beer is a very light beer. I think maybe the lowest alcohol percentage I've done. The percentage-wise is 2 point something.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So what do you think about the colour of this beer?
Holding it to the light, it is in the middle of light and dark. It's kind of a caramelly look to it.
Mm-hmm.
See that?
Yep. Right, for aroma?
I can't really smell anything. I think maybe my scents are off.
No, there's not much to it. So this only had bittering hops, and most of the smell often comes from the hops, and there were no hops added later on where most of the flavour would come from. So there's a very faint malty smell to it. I think if I was blindfolded, I could tell it's a sort of a caramel sort of beer, but other than that, now I obviously don't want you falling over drunk, but let's take a little sip of this 2% beer.
Doesn't really taste of anything.
No, well, what did you expect at 2%, right? I think there's a little bit of malt and caramel aspects to it.
I could see that.
But yeah, there's not a huge amount of flavour. I don't think it's like Bud Light kind of no taste. There is a little bit of that caramel aspect to it.
There's something going on with it. It's like not completely flat tasted at all. Like there's definitely, like I said, like a caramel note or something, but it's light. Like not what I expected with doing like a Scotch beer. Because previously when we were talking, like I'm not a big fan of Scotch beers because it just is not my taste. But this is not bad. Yeah,
it's a drinkable beer. I was going to say it's like a nice hot weather sunny beer, which is kind of ironic if it's a Scottish light.
Yeah. I don't hate it.
Well, I think when it comes to Scottish beers, that's a ringing endorsement. So I will take that. Cheers.
Cheers.